Good afternoon, everyone. Bill Phillips from Prince George Daily News here with our weekly Talk PG segment. And we have with us today Tracy Calogheros, Mackenzie Kerr, and Chuck Nisbett. And sorry, I'm stumbling on names today, so hope I didn't offend anyone. Yeah, we're going to start by following up a little bit from last week with Pouce Coupe Mayor Lorraine. Geez, I can never remember her last name, who got herself in hot water about posting some photos and then some comments that she made after that on at her public meeting, where she refused to step down and pretty much denied that she did anything wrong. So let's start this and go to Mackenzie.
Sure. I am just appalled that she is, the way that she responded to it was not worse than what she posted, but on par. If she responded by saying, I understand what I did and this was not okay, and respected people and decided to step down and, said whatever the excuse was, it's just how she responded to people, especially the people that came to the meeting. We were talking about that last week. Tracy brought up, she watched the whole video and she was slamming her gavel down towards like an Indigenous man, I think his name is Richard, for speaking up and sharing that he was upset with that. And I think that people just really need to be paying attention, because a lot of people are just apathetic. They don't read the news, they don't know what's going on, and election time comes around and people like this hope that they forget. So I think that we really need to just keep talking about it and bringing it up. And there's a petition right now to call for her resignation. Unfortunately, we really can't do anything unless we get provincial help, because it kind of shines a light on how hard it is for mayors or city councilors to be kicked out, or MPs or MLAs when they do bad things, in the community. There's no rules on these kinds of things. So I think it also brings to light what we do when we have someone like this in a position of power, and how we can get rid of them as a community when it's not in the best interest to keep them, because they do not reflect the values of the citizens. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that progresses. And I really, really hope that, us and myself can keep talking about it so that people don't just forget in 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Yeah. Tracy, we've toyed with recall legislation for at least provincial and probably federal politicians in the past, but I don't know that there's any mechanism for municipal politicians. Are you aware of anything, or how should we go about if we're just that up? Somebody is that over the top that they need to be removed, or the public wants to remove them.
Yeah, it's a challenge, because on the one hand, in this instance, it's pretty clear that this individual needs to get out of the seat that they're sitting in. But you also want to make sure that a recall piece of legislation isn't just wielded as a weapon and prove to be a continual distraction for those elected officials. There's something to be said for, you have an election, people are given a mandate, and then they have the duration of that elected period to be able to enact that mandate, and in some cases make decisions that large groups of the population may not agree with. So it's a thorny situation. I would encourage anyone who's listening to follow Andrew Criada's coverage of this story, because he had more posts again this morning, and I know he has spoken to the province and talk to them about whether there is a mechanism for the province to be able to remove a municipal sitting elected official. And the general answer seems to be no, there's nothing in place, but now they're looking at it. So, I can argue both sides of it. In the instance of this mayor in Pouce Coupe, I don't think there's any question that she needs to be removed, and she should be doing it under her own volition. That'll trigger an election in any case, and she could certainly run again and see whether or not the general public agrees with her. I'm appalled. Appalled is the right word, Mackenzie, at the fact that this individual is sitting in an elected seat and behaving in a way that is so damaging, not just to the people that elected her, but to people that didn't elect her, and yet she is expected to represent. We need to do a far better job of selecting our elected officials, I think, and that requires people to be informed and involved.
Chuck, I don't know if you've been following this or not. You weren't here last week when we talked about this previously, but Do you have any comments on the situation if you've been following it? I'm not sure if you're aware, but she posted some really bad photos on Facebook, and the inference was, of course, that these were rundown places on reserve, and that's what you're saying, that how can these people want to oppose the pipeline and that kind of stuff. So, your comments on this?
Well, I've listened to some coverage on the line and on CBC and stuff, and I followed what she said at her council meeting, and yeah, I don't think she should be in power. I mean, she should be removed from that seat, definitely. The fact that there's nothing that allows that to happen is kind of amazing. I'm a little shocked that I don't know. I think maybe this is her second term as mayor there. She's been there for a while. I'm shocked that she would have posted something the way she did and then react the way she did to people instead of saying, oh, oops, you know what? I said that wrong and it didn't come out the way I wanted, or wow, I totally blew this, and you know, I really should have thought my way through this beforehand. But the way she came out just slashing at people is, no, this is wrong. You can't do that. You can't represent a people that way. And with putting something that hurtful up, no, she just needs to be gone. I really think there needs to be some mechanism that allows us to replace somebody or trigger an election automatically, you know, without having to wait for her to say, yeah, I'm going to stand down, you know. We should be able to go, yeah, we need to have a new mayor. Let's elect one and get it going. You know,
I wonder if there'd be some provincial mechanism around the violation of the principles of UNDRIP that might allow for that.
That's a possibility. I wonder.
Because you definitely need to find some kind of a measure that, you know, a line that someone has to cross in order to trigger something like that. And I think because the province has adopted UNDRIP, that would make sense to me from a definition standpoint. Because to your point, you know, her initial comments and her initial reaction were bad enough. And then you follow the meeting that she requested with Treaty 8 individuals who were willing to teach. And their requirement, though, was that she needed to step down and that they were voicing the same concerns her own council did, as well as surrounding municipal leaders and elected officials. I don't know if there's been any condemnation from the MP of the area. That would be an interesting question to put to the MP, because for certain, most of the surrounding mayors and the Benai Brith and others have stepped up and said that this is absolutely unacceptable. And in this instance, yeah, I agree. She needs to be removed.
Bob Zimmer posted a tweet wearing a Pouce Coupe toque and doing a bit of he didn't talk about the issue, but he had a Pouce Coupe wearing a toque and saying he was proud of his Pouce Coupe toque. So you can read into that what you want from a comment from the MP. So I don't know what that means. But anyways, but the other thing it just sort of occurred to me with her response is that her initial excuse for posting that was saying that was an old post that she had deleted, but she feared that somebody else had seen it and was going to repost it, and she knew basically that was going to cause her problems. So my feeling is she knew it was wrong because she posted it, took it down, and then reposted it because she figured she was either going to get blackmailed or smeared with it. So then when it came out, then she did a complete 180 and was unrepentant. So the whole thing just is bizarre.
The whole thing is just backwards. I don't understand. Like, she takes a post that was deleted and posts it again knowing it was wrong because someone says that, and then she says, well, you're interpreting it wrong. Nothing is wrong with what I posted. It doesn't have anything to do with Indigenous people. What else could it be referring to? Like, yeah, it's so funny how that was her, like, she just went back and forth. I don't understand. I did have someone say a comment on my live, and I think it would be really important to bring up. They said, do you have an integrity commissioner for municipalities in BC? And I asked her where she's from, and she said Ontario. So I feel like if we don't have one of those, that is something that we should create to deal with this exact problem.
Good point.
That's an
I don't
interesting
believe we
point.
do in this province have an integrity commissioner or anything like
Or municipalities specifically. And I think that
municipalities?
is a very good idea.
No. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Yeah, you need to take the control for that out of the hands of potential competitors, I think, within the political environment. So if it's handled by an ombudsman or
Yeah.
someone remote, it makes good sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny you talk about municipalities. I know some of this stuff has been going on for a long time. When I was down in Williams Lake, there was open calls to blockade the reserves west of town because there was a car theft problem. That not only came from the municipality or from the elected leaders, it came from most people in town. You hear that all the time because there was a real at Williams Lake there. I don't know what year, but there was one time when they were going at a clip of a car theft about every day and a half.
Wow.
There's an astounding rate of car thefts, and a lot of them would end up on reserve, burnt. That's what happened, right? So there were calls, and they came from the mayor and council to, for the province to do something. And a lot of people just wanted to block the road out to the reserves, and that would solve the car theft problem, which it wouldn't, of course. But it just shows you the mindset of a lot of people.
Yeah, we've seen some really problematic behavior coming from Williams Lake City Council as well. There was some comments. Andrew Kiriata has been on top of it as well. I think I'm not sure how long ago, I want to say like a year or two maybe, about one of the city councilors, saying that residential schools were good for Indigenous people because they were educational or something like that. And that person is still a city councilor.
Wow, that's hard to believe. That's amazing.
Well, those comments when I was there, a lot of those same people that were there making those comments then, which has got to be 20 years ago or 30 years ago now, are still on city council. So they're still there.
What it points to is that all of the uprising in the last year around systemic racism and the work that's being done in Canada around true reconciliation is work that has to happen, and it is legitimate work, and it requires not just a financial but a personal investment, and we need to embed it in our educational systems and in our hiring practices. It's not a problem that's going to go away in 4 years. As Bill said, he saw it 20 years ago, and I guarantee you if you went 20 years back before that, you'd see it again. I sit in Clayton Memorial Park, and I have an MOU with the Clayton. I hear lots of these kinds of comments, and I will tell you that they have become less and less prevalent as people have recognized the work that we do here, and the community has started to pay attention to the exhibit work that has happened and the conversations that are happening, and they're starting to actually have friends within the Clayton Nation that is allowing people to understand each other a little better. The Pouce Coupe mayor, or what happened in Williams Lake, or what happens in any other part of this country or any other around fear of the other, and that being expressed as hatred and as racist statements. We're having this conversation internationally right now. It's a good thing that we're having the conversation, and things will change, but it will always go back to individuals like what Mackenzie's doing, starting a petition, trying to make sure that this is going to be dealt with, and that the individuals who elected that mayor know that they bear part of the responsibility for the behavior, and that once the opportunity arrives to unelect her, if they don't, that speaks to the whole community.
Yeah, I just have to say I agree with Tracy wholeheartedly, and I work mainly in the Shelley area, and for the last year or so, and the more and more you get to know the people in the Shelley community, the more and more you realize how many really great people there are out there, and the more and more you realize it's the same everywhere. Once you know the people in the area, you get to know who's good, who's bad, who's whatever, right? It doesn't matter what race you are or anything. There's good, bad, and indifferent all over. So yeah, just people just have to understand that everybody's got that mix. It's not specific to, you know, to the indigenous peoples. It's not black people. It's not red people, like yellow people, not anything. It's just people. Everybody's got that spooky mix. You don't know where everybody's coming from, but it doesn't take long once you get to hang out with them to know who's who, right? So yeah, people need to pay attention. It's not everybody from any race or any area. It's those specific individuals that cause problems. And
Well,
that's where racism gets its base, is people don't understand that it's just those people.
Yeah. Well, if you believe the biblical story of Adam and Eve, then we all stem from the same parents. So, you know, we're all the same, right? We're all inbred.
Now we're going to talk politics and religion. Really? We're going into religion now too?
We're really going for it now.
Yeah, it was tough.
I feel like we should pick one or the other, not to overwhelm our sense of security.
Okay. Well, let's get back to politics then, not particularly Pouce Coupe, but in that area. The other topic we were going to talk about, of course, was Site C, and that was the provincial government on the other day said it's going to cost $16 billion now, but we're going ahead anyways. Damn the torpedoes, you know, literally and figuratively. And we're too far gone to wheel it back. Mackenzie, let's start with you, because you talked about this before with your divorce analogy.
Yeah, the divorce analogy is a perfect analogy. Someone gave it to me, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but it's brilliant. I did want to add in there first before we move on. I didn't start the petition. Stephanie Gowdy did. She's from that area, and she's an NDP supporter, but I'm friends with her on Facebook, and so I shared the petition and think that's really important. Doesn't matter who it came from. So yeah, wanted to add that in there. The petition is all over my social media if you want to find it and sign it as well. But Site C is a sunk cost fallacy. And if you don't know what that is, please Google it, because I didn't know what that was either. And now I have the perfect word to use to describe this. So the divorce analogy, I like it. I think it kind of is really easy to understand and very similar in what we're dealing with right now. Doesn't matter if you're married to someone and you buy a house and you buy a lot of expensive things and you have all this money put into it. If your mental health, aka the environment and all of the things that this is going to be negative for, you know, the indigenous land, the farmland, all of these things that we're going to be ruining with Site C, if it's not worth it and it's harming you, it doesn't matter how much money you've put into it, you still cancel it. You will be saving money if you cancel it. Right now we're like 10 billion in, so we will be saving 6 billion, but it's not even going to be 16 billion. It's going to be over that. And Sonia First to Know is, you know, looking at the reports and sharing this and saying that's not even what it's going to be. It's going to be higher than that. And it's just crazy that the people that we have, you know, approving these projects do not understand the thing that I learned very quickly from some Twitter threads about sunk cost fallacy and basic economics. It's uneconomical, and we have conservative think tanks also saying so. And I shared a video about this last week, and it got a lot of traction because, you know, the information is out there to show us that it's not worth it, and that we're not actually past the point of no return, and that it would be worth it to not go through with the project. And we also, in the video I included, and the Green Party had a video conference 2 weeks ago with the past Utilities Commissioner that knows everything about the Site C project. And he said, you know, we can be making the same amount of power with renewables for half the price. And we don't even need all of this power, even if everyone goes to electric in the next 40 years. We don't actually need the amount of power that it's going to create, which I didn't know either. So I think that we just really need to be asking for the reports. We haven't got reports from the provincial government in a year. They haven't even given the legislature quarterly reports of the project, and it's the largest, most expensive project in the province. Like, everything is just, there's no transparency. It's all secret. That needs to come first, and then we need to really look if it's safe and viable to go through with it, and if it's economical. And so far it's not. So that's my view on that.
There you go. Tracy, your thoughts on this? It's too bad we don't have Todd Gorgel here today, because I'm sure he would have a bit of differing opinion than Mackenzie, but that's okay. I'm sure he'll be back next week, and we might have to revisit this. But Tracy, your
Yeah, I would
thoughts?
certainly, I would appreciate having a more informed voice on that side of the argument on this conversation. I do not feel that I am fully versed on everything that's going on. Some of the comments that Mackenzie just shared are contrary to things that I thought were accepted wisdom around the need for the electricity. If we're going to switch to everybody having electric cars, we wouldn't have enough on the grid, was one of the statements that I recall from the past about why we needed Site C. As far as throwing good money after bad, there's a reason that's a sentence that all of us are aware of. You know, at some point, if the decision is made that the project isn't economic, then just because you've got billions invested in it is not good justification for continuing to go forward. They're already in the hole is a really lousy reason to leave somebody in a hole. Having said that, I also believe that when you trust experts and hire officials, whether that's an elected official or a senior government analyst, to run these kinds of projects, that we shouldn't be second guessing them every 5 minutes. So, you know, I'm responding, Mackenzie, to what you said, with knowing that I am no expert on this, but you opened with saying that it was not economical, it doesn't make sense, we shouldn't do it, we don't need it. And you closed by saying they're not being transparent, so we don't know exactly what all of the information is, and we need that to make a determination. So which is it? Like, is it good or isn't it good? And how do we take a stand without knowing what's happening? So I think it circles to needing that transparency, particularly in an issue that's become such a public hot potato. We're going to need that independent expert that everybody can trust to say, here's all the facts. And then you can make a personal assessment based on that. But as it stands right now, I don't have all the facts I would need to make that assessment. And so my default would be to trust those elected officials and professional bureaucracy that are in place to manage these projects and make decisions that are provincial in nature, as opposed to being either special interest driven or individual driven. For what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
There you go. Chuck?
Well, for my 2 cents, I will say I know nothing. I really don't. You know, I've read stuff on this, and half of it just goes right over the top of my head. But basic economics to me says, if it's not good and we've thrown a whole bunch of money at it, why throw more money at it? You know, that seems to basically it. They're saying now, well, you know, we've already done the damage, we flooded everything, and you know, it's going to be a problem if we're trying to reclaim the land that we've bought from people and whatever, you know. I think $6 million or $6 billion would go a long way to fixing things back to where they should be. You know, I really think, as Tracy says, we need, and Mackenzie, we need more information. We need the information that they're looking at. We're not getting it. Nobody's showing us what's happened, really. It's all hearsay, and you know, nobody goes out there and takes a look. You know, when's the last time you saw meaningful pictures of the whole area? It's been forever since the beginning of this project. I haven't seen a decent picture of the whole project. So, yeah, I think it just needs to stop. Stop throwing money away, and let's look at making things as good as we can and move on. Find other ways. There's lots of other ways of generating power without flooding the land, and you know, it just seems like a waste to me.
Yeah, like the left bank of the dam there, it's a quagmire. It really is, and that's part of the problem for me. It's kind of funny because I remember listening to my father in the 1980s rail against Site C back then. There was all kinds of concerns about it 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
When I first came to BC, there were concerns about it. That was in 91.
Yeah. Yeah, the couple of the questions that I have, and Mackenzie's right, there's just too many questions, I think, and I think part of the provincial decision is that this is the easiest way out. Because Chuck, you mentioned about the property. What do you do if you cancel that? Do you give back the land to the farmers that you expropriated? And that also opens the question of the Treaty 8 people up there. So if there's land to be had, they're probably going to say, hold on, don't give it back to the farmers because that's our land.
Yeah.
You know, like there's quagmires and all kinds of crazy stuff that can go on. And to me, it's about and you know, we talked about economics and I haven't seen this from the government. Is there a return on investment? That should be part of the key thing. Is we're going to put in $16 billion or more into this. When do we expect that the province will recoup that $16 billion? Because we're going to charge for the electricity. So if there's an actual return on investment, well, that kind of, you know, that can ease the pain, but we're not seeing it. Mackenzie.
I encourage everyone to watch the 1 hour webinar thing on the Green Party BC website, because that's where I learned this information from a week and a half ago. So it's fairly fresh. We will not be getting a return on our investment. If we sell the power, the number that I have seen is 3 billion. Like it's not even, that's the number that I have seen coming from these reports. And so I was saying about, you know, there's lack of reports, which is very true on the transparency side, but we do know that it's uneconomical because we have enough reports to know the basics of the economics. We're not getting all the geotechnical reports and we're not getting the quarterly reports, but the government, and because I follow the Green Party very closely, they release them as soon as they get them. And we do have enough reports to know the basics, that it is not good to go any further until we get every single report, and that it is uneconomical with what reports we have so far. So we don't have all of them yet, but we have enough to know it's a bad decision right now, in my view. And I think the thing that Todd would be bringing up is the jobs, because that's what we heard the Premier bringing up a lot. And I'm not saying that he's associated with Premier, it's just, yeah, those would be brought up as well, because we haven't talked about that yet. It's 4,500 temporary jobs. I haven't seen the number for permanent jobs, but is 4,500 temporary jobs worth $16 billion that we're going to have to pay over the next 100 years? Like, we can retrain those people very easily on, you know, more renewable energy sources, or, I mean, the Green Party is in support of UBI and transitioning people off of oil and gas jobs. So how many jobs, you know, when we're not thinking of actual people, we're just thinking in terms of numbers. When is it worth it to save a project for 4,500 jobs? Like, what is the price range? I think it's just interesting when people are like, but what about the jobs? But they're temporary. That's temporary jobs. They're not even long-term jobs. Same with when pipelines are created. Yeah. They're mostly temporary with a very small amount of permanent jobs. So what is the benefit, I guess, the con pros to doing that? I don't know. I think that that's something that would be brought up too that we haven't talked about yet. So I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, so much of this sounds like the old LRMP conversations where they're trying to decide whether we want caribou or snowmobiling. Like, everyone approaches all of this like a zero-sum game. And I don't buy it. I think that we all need to be talking to each other about what our goals are. You know, if we could, you know, you think about it from an organizational standpoint, you know, you set a mission, and then every decision you make follows that mission, and you revisit it every now and again. And you can make that same assessment for a province. Every 4 years, we re-examine what our mission is, and we decide collectively which party or which elected officials are going to implement that mission and mandate. And then we get out of their way and let them have a go at it for 4 years. But I don't think anybody's talking to anybody else. And for all the video that you're telling us to watch might be great, Mackenzie, but anybody who's watching it on the Green Party website is going to do so this way, because they're going to wonder, is it just partisanship? Is this just more attacks on the sitting government? And that's not necessarily fair. In fact, I'm certain it's not fair. I have no statement here on whether or not there's veracity in that video, but to send the general public to a political party website to learn about an issue that has implications in daily life as well as on a political scale is not the way the public is going to engage. You'll get supporters and you'll get people that hate the Green Party, and both will take their polarized opinions and scream at each other in the comments section, and it doesn't get us any further ahead. So I don't know how we get that information into the hands of the general public in a way that makes sense.
No one else is doing it. That's
That's right.
why it's so important. That's the only place I can point people.
Yeah.
I would point them to an independent source that is not the Green Party, but literally no one else is talking about Site C and the transparency issues and everything going on other than the Green Party right now. That's why I pointed people there. And, you know, it's the independent commissioner, past utilities commissioner of the whatever it's called, but he was on there, you know, and it's the chief of West Moberly First Nations, I believe, as well. And then someone else, and Sonia, sorry to the someone else, I forget. So, you know, Sonia's there because the Green Party's hosting it, because they reached out and said, hey, we want to host an event so people can learn. But no one else is doing it. If an independent person or group was calling these people to host an independent Zoom call that they could post for the public to see, great, I'll point them there, but no one's doing it. So yeah,
the BC Utilities Commission should be doing that. They're the authority that's overseeing this. But I agree. I haven't been on their website lately, but they're not doing this information as far as I know. And when I have been on their site, the information they give is so technical. Unless you're an engineer, you really don't understand any of it, anyways. You know,
This is what the old investigative journalists used to do, Bill. This was the role of media.
that's investigative journalists from in the past, or just the ones now that are old? Which one?
Yeah, I recognize that the media outlets have been decimated, and that's a whole other conversation that I think we should probably have, because I think that society is poorer for not having investigative journalism, because we do then run into this situation where if you're not presenting it in an unbiased, nonpartisan way, the public's going to discount it or attack it.
And the other aspect of this too, of course, with Site C is that it's up in a forgotten corner of the province, about as far away as you can get from the media outlets that actually have investigative journalists, and they don't really care about it. You know, I saw the you know, I just shook my head because the press conference over this had Premier Horgan and all the media, and Bruce Ralston was there, and had a few other people, and they went on for half an hour, 45 minutes, like they do on the press conference. And then I watched one of the reporters from the Lower Mainland changed the subject and wanted to talk about the death threats against Dr. Bonnie Henry. So the nightly, and Horgan, of course, addressed it because he asked the question. So the nightly newscast on one of our major outlets in this province about that press conference was Premier Horgan responding to the question about Bonnie Henry. Site C barely got a mention. You know, so that's part of the problem too with the media, is it's always been that way though, with the media in this province, is that it's down the Lower Mainland. It's out of sight, out of mind for them, so they don't really care, and they should, because it's costing everybody in British Columbia money.
We used to have the investigative journalists here, like Gord Hoekstra, Marilyn Story. They would focus everybody's attention on these issues and keep it there. You know, they would be digging so hard. They would be constantly unearthing new facts and bringing them forward and showing people this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about, so that we got some attention up here, instead of it just blowing by and everyone going, yeah, it's way up there and we don't really need to worry about it. You know, that is really the role of the investigative journalist, and it's a real shame we're not getting it, because if you had that kind of journalist here still, we would know more about Site C.
We would.
Yeah.
You know, we just don't, because nobody spent the time to, or put the resources in to go digging. And there would be times, I know, when Marilyn would spend a long time digging through a project, and she would do a couple of side stories here and there, but most of her time was spent working on her in-depth investigation. And you were allowed to do that then. But now with the 24-hour news cycle, everything has to be there, bang, 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 bang. And I don't even think it's 24 hour anymore. I think it's more like 6. And yeah, you've got to have everything coming now, right? And yeah, it's a shame. It's damaging us, damaging our information flow, not having those people there anymore.
Yeah, that's the changing face of journalism, that's for sure. You know, I'm up to my eyeballs in the corruption at City Hall story, but I got to drop it because the mayor's cutting a ribbon somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, that's been around for a long time too. So, yeah.
Bill, my understanding of that loss in media really is that it stemmed around advertising and the shift into a digital world. And so like the old printed newspaper was so driven by advertising that's what paid everybody's salaries. And then organizations like the museum stopped finding return on investment from buying ads in those papers. So we stopped buying ads, and that impacts the paper's ability to pay its staff. So then they start cutting, and the one you cut is the one who's not putting a headline out every day, the investigative journalist.
That's exactly.
Am I right on that? Is that really
exactly
the crux of it?
Ad revenues fell off the table. And when that happens, the editorial departments, which have no revenue component to them, they're a drain on your bottom line. They're the first to go.
So then you look at like this Pouce Coupe story, and the one we've cited several times is Andrew Criado, who's following it and tracking it. That's CBC. Yeah. And yet, boy, do you ever hear people scream and yell about the fact that CBC is government funded. Because they haven't been impacted by ad revenue, they've been able to retain that level.
Exactly. If they weren't government funded, there would be no investigation anywhere. You know, nobody would have the power to do it because you all rely on ad revenue. The first things to go when the ad revenue started to drop were the photography departments.
Yeah,
that was first and
foremost.
You
would know that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That was the first and foremost. Everyone went, whoa, we don't need to have 10 photographers or 3 photographers. We can get by with 1. And we'll get a couple of guys to work part-time to fill in the weekends kind of thing, right? That's what they did here. And then the funny thing is, the cameras on phones got so good, they went, well, we really don't need him around, so we'll just get rid of him. Everyone take your camera with you and shoot a couple of pictures while you're doing this story. And that's where we are now. You know,
and you know, Chuck, the most valuable and most used part of the museum collection are the Dave Milne images and the Dave Ma images, and the ones that, because the photographer would go out, they'd be the one talking to the people, and they would write that cut line right on the back of the prints. And so when we took in all the prints, I've got all of this social data that isn't anywhere. It's not captured in the story necessarily. It's not captured in an artifact that someone would donate. But those journalistic photographs tell the story of the development of this entire part of the world. And I'm sure it's true everywhere.
Well, and you also have the negatives, which there's one print that goes through, but there may be 10 on each side of that roll of film telling the rest of the story, you know, and we're not getting that no more. Yeah, it's a real shame. I really think, well, I think there's a hole left with local news. Everyone says, yeah, you know, it's the big news outfits which are the most important, the most powerful, but local news is the binding and the information source that starts everything. You know, when I remember coming out of journalism school and thinking, yeah, first thing I want to do is I want to get overseas, man. That's the way. I'm going overseas and I'm going to become a big war photographer, and it's going to be great. I'm going to be ducking in and out of foxholes and taking pictures. Great. And I moved to Medicine Hat and discovered that there was a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know about Medicine Hat and ranching and all that stuff. So I just started exploring it and taking pictures of it. And wow, it was really interesting. Then I moved here and there's forests. Well, I'd never seen a forest before in my life, pretty much. So I explored it, right? And there's so much, and you just get that idea and you get those, you start searching and exploring and discovering new things. And they used to just basically, I'd drive in the morning, they'd say, you've got to be here at this time, there at this time, here at this time, the rest of the time is your own. And I'd walk out the door and go, see ya, and just go look. And when you have that kind of freedom, you can find so much information on anything, and people just don't get that anymore. It's a real shame, because we used to dig up all sorts of fun things and some not so fun things, but we would bring back the info. And I really think it's a problem that we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, we always used to joke that we write history as it happens.
Yeah.
Mackenzie?
Some of the longest interviews I've had are with the smallest newspapers as well. The Rocky Mountain Goat published an article today, but it ended up in the Star, which is amazing. But she phoned me and we talked for 45 minutes. And big news stations do not have time, to talk to local community organizers or politicians or candidates or things like that. They don't have time, and so they don't get the whole story, and they can really shape a story. And it was really cool. She phoned Sonia. She's a legislative reporter with the Rocky Mountain Goat, Fran, and the story was like me and Sonia both with equal airtime in the article, and it was really cool about what we are asking of the government in the new legislative period that started on Monday. So it's really cool to see small scale newspapers and things like that, have the time to really talk about the important issues, because so often they're skipped over because there's just no time, because there's only one person covering all the stories in the day and they don't have time, right? So, yeah.
That's funny that you say that. The Goat, we used to print the Goat at the Citizen, and I know that it has a run of 700 copies. 700. That's a tiny little paper, but they're really good. It's cool.
It is really cool.
So what's the solution on that front then? We want more investigative journalism. We know that ad revenue is not going to support it. How do we support that as a society? And I think that's a conversation we should be having. And we shouldn't, much like we can't leave all of the emotional labor around systemic racism to people of color, I also think we need to deal with how we fund investigative journalism as a society, not just leave that in the hands of the media to desperately try and find yet a new way to make ends meet, because it distracts from the very important job of ensuring that all of us are well informed on subjects that we're not subject matter experts on, and that we can have really open conversations, trusting that the baseline information that our conversations are all coming out of is accurate and consistent across the board. We need journalists, and we're not paying for them right now.
Well, the government has actually acknowledged that that's a problem. And they have introduced, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it's like the Canadian Journalist Fund or something, that where they will fund journalists in specific areas to keep them working. But it's a little bit, it's not enough. It's helped in some cases, but basically what it's done is it's put maybe one or two journalists back at work at a paper where they've been cut from. It doesn't go deep enough to give them that ability to have somebody who will do those deep projects and get deep into things, right? There's a lot of work still to be done to save local investigation. I mean, it's something that needs to be saved, and there's got to be a way of making it work without that ad revenue, and maybe I don't know, funding specific projects or something. I don't know, but there's a way. There's got to be a way to make it happen.
Excuse me. Some online publications do that. I know the Tyee will advertise to fund a special project for elections and stuff like that. In my mind, the key thing is for local businesses who want everybody to shop local. Well, they should too, and put some of their money back into local media. It's tough. You know, Australia is looking at charging Facebook and Twitter and them for using media from that, and that's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. But the basic thing for local media is if the local businesses advertise, that's the easiest way to get around it. And of course, the other problem from my perspective is that newspapers did it to themselves some time ago. They moved away from the subscription model, which provided another source of income other than advertising. And then the free distribution papers came along, and subscriptions kind of died, and that we found out has hurt newspapers because you know, I don't know the numbers at the Citizen, but it was probably like $250,000 a year in subscriptions, and they give that up.
Yeah.
So because people don't want to buy it, we've conditioned people not to buy news. We understand that we have to buy socks. We understand that we have to buy food. We understand that we have to go to Starbucks and get a coffee. But damn it, we want the paper to be free. We want our news to be free wherever it is. So we have to change our attitudes. And part of the thing, I think the sad part of it is that a lot of people don't understand that the value of journalism these days, and they see it. Once again, journalists are its own worst enemy, because we have a lot of journalists, or a lot of news outlets, quasi news outlets, that are nothing more than propaganda machines, and people recognize that and they tune it off. So
yeah,
you know,
I think newspapers have got to get out of their own way. You know, they the whole, as you say, the whole free newspaper distribution really destroyed the industry. And it made it so much harder for them to stay a viable business. The expenses of printing a newspaper, especially a daily newspaper, are phenomenal. They really are high. And it just became increasingly hard to fight against Facebook advertising, for instance. You know, I mean, we had businesses in town that steadfastly stood behind the Citizen for years and years and years. And then you have businesses that just went, you know, I just can't justify it when it costs me 40% less to advertise on Facebook than it does with you. So
yeah, you can't.
Well, and you're getting better return there.
Yeah, that's exactly.
As a business owner, I could run ads all day long in the print publications in town, and nobody knew I was hosting an event because people were not reading the print publications.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Mackenzie, you were gonna add something there?
Yeah. I think also we need to encourage more young people to be inspired to get into journalism and learn how important it is. So I don't know if that looks like when I entered forestry, I did a Rotary program, Adventures in Forestry, and they took me through all of the, you know, jobs that you can do as a forester. And I think that they have that with nursing or healthcare now. If we did something similar like that with journalism to inspire people in high school of, you know, why this is really important and that kind of thing, I think that could be a way. But I mean, again, that's a not-for-profit trying to fix a problem that is not their problem to begin with. It's a downloaded problem, right? So I think that would be really good, but I think it's just really important for people, you know, kind of like what I'm doing, like sharing the news on public platforms that are accessible to young people, like on TikTok and Instagram. And you know, some of us still need to be doing what Bill is doing, but some of us also need to be, that are interested in it, going to those other areas where new young people are, to inspire them to not be apathetic and look at the news and then maybe find a career in that kind of thing as well, and why it's really important to find the truth and, you know, question what we're hearing and making sure that it's real sources and all of that. I mean, it's shoved down our throats to check our sources in high school and post-secondary, but none of us really connect that to real life. We just kind of think about that when we're writing scientific papers or things like that, right? So I think that we need to do both. So I'm hoping that doing these kinds of things inspire young people to do the same thing, because I can't do it all either. Like, we need as many people as possible to be doing this kind of thing to share the news. And there's more people doing that in our communities, which is really exciting to see, and lots of really engaged, amazing young people, but we need more. So
I have to make a confession before my kids call me out. My son, about 10 years ago, said, "Yeah, I really want to become a journalist, Dad." And I said, "Oh, wait, don't do that."
Oh, so it's all your fault, Chuck.
Yeah, so I inadvertently pulled it away from it. I said, "Go do something that makes money. Don't do that."
And that is the downside, is it's not a lucrative profession, and that is part of the problem too. So, but speaking from experience, you will have more adventures as a journalist than you can ever imagine. You will get to see people and talk to people that you had no idea were doing some of the things they're doing, and and all that kind of stuff, and you end up in some pretty thrilling spots, as I'm sure Chuck can attest to.
I've had
an amazing profession.
The most amazing experiences going to work. I go to work with a smile on my face every day. It just didn't matter. I loved it. I even fell out of a sky in a helicopter on its side, taking pictures over the hoodoos in Alberta, and it was great.
Well, but I'm sure the best part was both of you guys got to meet me because you were in media.
There you go. See.
Exactly. But I'll tell one thrilling story. Is the 1 year after Oka, on the 1 year anniversary, I found myself on the front lines of a blockade between the Tusi Indian Band and the Canadian military. Let me tell you, there were some shaking in my boots when I was heading out there, because you want to have someone, it's one thing to blockade a rail line that you could step out of the way. It's another thing to blockade tanks.
Yeah.
But it was all peaceful, and it ended without incident. But it was the 1 year anniversary of Oka, and they chose that date specifically to blockade a military reserve out in the Chilcotin, and there was lots of fear about what could happen and how everything could go down, right? So yeah, so you can, when as a journalist, you get to go to some of these things, right?
Yeah,
exciting part of it.
It is exciting. There's lots of days when I used to cruise around town, and I would turn over rocks looking for pictures, man. You just couldn't find anything. It'd be rainy and dreary, and there would be nobody out and about. And you know what? You start looking at what the rain's doing, and you go, "Hey, when it's just like this, rain does this. That's so neat."
on boring days, we always used to joke that we should go rob a bank because there's no news going on. So at least we have something to report on.
People always wonder why I always carry my camera, because you just never know. I used to say, I could be standing on the bank lineup and it gets robbed, and I'm going to get a picture.
But we are coming up to our hour, so maybe we'll just go around the horn quickly. Anybody want to give shout outs to anybody before we go?
I got one. I would really like to thank the Northern Development Initiative Trust for their announcement of funding this week. There's close to $300,000 that is coming into the museum here in our Living Evolution project. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Helena Trudell at Novatone. She's doing all the project management for us on the project for nothing. And Catherine Scouten at KRS Solutions did all of the business case and planning for us. So it's a great project. It's super exciting. We got more info to come and hopefully more money on its way. But NDIT really has brought some incredible funds to some really cool projects in Northern BC. And I think it's making all of our lives better. So my thumbs up this week is for NDIT.
There you go. Mackenzie?
I am just going to give a general reminder to everyone to wear their masks and go to the farmers market on Saturday. Buy local if you can, but also acknowledge that it's expensive and you're not evil if you can't, buy in zero plastic and buy everything from the farmers market. Just do the best you can and call your friends and grandparents, because we're coming up on a year of COVID and everyone's getting pretty lonely. So try and get outside to get some vitamin C when we do have sun, vitamin D. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Chuck?
And I'd like to say, well, my mother's birthday was last week, and we got, I think there was 8 or 9 of us joined in on a little Zoom talk with Mom. Anybody who hasn't tried it, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It was so much fun. It was just like sitting down with all my brothers and sisters and hanging out, and it was cool. So yeah, we had a blast. That's such a neat thing to try, and it does keep you connected. I'd also like to say, and this is not just for Northern BC or Central BC, this is world over. I'd like to say goodbye to Buddy Whaler, the last of the Whalers, with Bob Marley, and it's the end of an era. They brought reggae to the world from Jamaica, and the last one's gone. Hate to see it. So goodbye, buddy.
There you go. Yeah, and I'll give a bit of a self-serving shout out. Not really self-serving, but everybody in town knows John Brink, and he's got a book coming out on March 12th. And my involvement in that, I have a small part to play in the book, is that I helped him with some editing during the process of his writing the book. So I'll give a shout out. That's coming out March 12th. And there's an audio book. I helped with some editing on the audio book as well. So it's a very interesting story, believe me. But anyways, on that note, thanks to Tracy Calogheros, Mackenzie Kerr, and Chuck Nisbett, and for everybody out there who has watched today. And we will be back next week.